My name is Phil Price. I'm the priest in charge of the Draycott and Lem Valley Benefice, and this is my Sunday sermon for the 17th of March. Just before I pray and we dig in, just to say we're doing things a little bit differently this week because for our All Sorts service at Leamington Hastings, we are doing a trial run of our new Building Church initiative that we're going to launch after Easter. Um, and that building church is part of a wider strategy for how we as a benefice try to reach out and make church a place that children and families and young people can come to and be fed, and that we can really welcome and serve this demographic that aren't terribly well represented in our pews at present. So building church is a big part of our our plan to try and be more accommodating for children and families. So what I wanted to do, because we're kind of giving a taster session for people to see what it looks like at Leamington Hastings this week, I'm going to go rogue. I'm going to go off lectionary, and we're going to have a little look at Paul's ministry in Athens and what he did to reach new groups of people in Athens, because our strategy and our way of reaching children and families is going to be following a similar pattern to what Paul did. So what we're going to do is we're going to read Acts 17. I'm going to talk mainly on what Paul did in Athens and how there was actually a strategy behind what he was doing. And I'll very briefly talk you through how we're applying that in our approach to children and families over the next couple of months and years. I do realise at this point, if you're one of those people that switches off at the word strategy, or you feel ill-equipped to help support ministry to children and families, you may be tempted to kind of glaze over and switch the computer off and not engage with this video. I really urge you not to do that, because even if strategy isn't your thing, and even if children and families isn't where your passion and your heart lies, I think it's important to underline and to say this is our collective mission. As a church, we are here to tell people about Jesus and to bring people into our fold. So it's incumbent on all of us to play our part in that mission. Some people may listen and be really pumped up and come up with lots of practical ways they are going to support us. Others, their calling might be to pray, to support, or to offer encouragement. But whatever we feel about the word strategy and whatever we feel our gifts are in relation to ministry and mission, this is our mission as a church. We are here to reach people. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to engage with what we are doing, to work to understand what we are doing and why, so that we can offer the best informed prayer and practical support that we all can. So there's no personal application for this. No, I'm going to go home and do this now. Rather, just an unpacking of what we are doing and a call to find our place within that call. So that's what we're going to do this morning. I'm just going to pray, and then we will dive in to Acts 17. Lord God, we thank you so much for the gift of your word. As we come to read and reflect on it now, I pray that you may give us all ears to hear and eyes to see what your call is for us as a benefice, that you may show us ways that we can reach out to those who don't know you yet, particularly to families and young people. Please speak to each of us and show each of us our place in this strategy as we go forwards. Amen. So we're going to read Acts chapter 17. And we're going to start at verse 16. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he argued in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons, and also in the marketplace, every day with those who happened to be there. And some Epicurean and Stoic philosophers debated with him. Some said, "What does this babbler want to say?" Others said, "He seems to be a proclaimer of foreign deities." This was because he was telling them about the good news of Jesus and the resurrection. So they took him and brought him to the Areopagus and asked him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? It sounds rather strange to us, so we want to know what it means." Now all the Athenians and the foreigners living there would spend their time in thing but telling or hearing something new. Then Paul stood in front of the Areopagus and said, Athenians, I see how extremely religious you are in every way. For as I went through the city and looked carefully at the objects of your worship, I found among them an altar with the inscription to an unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, he who is Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mortals life and breath and all things. From one ancestor he made all nations to inhabit the whole earth, and he allotted the times to their existence and to the boundaries of the places where they would live, so that they would search for God, and perhaps grope for him and find him, though indeed he is not far from each of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we too are his offspring. Since we are God's offspring, we ought not to think that the deity is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of mortals. While God has overlooked the times of human ignorance, now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day on which he will have the world judged in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. When they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some scoffed, but others said, We will hear you again about this. At that point, Paul left them, but some of them joined him and became believers. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Wonder if you've ever had that experience of going on holiday and visiting a place that you didn't really want to visit. It's just that the people that you were with did want to visit that place. And as the people you're with look all around, they're all impressed with everything they see. Because you didn't want to go there and you're feeling quite grumpy, all you can see is everything that's wrong with that place. I get this quite often when we visit National Trust properties as a family. We've visited a lot of National Trust properties as a family because the annual membership was quite a cheap way of getting quite a lot of family days out. And Esther absolutely loves the National Trust. I, on the other hand, am not so keen. And I'll be honest with you, the main reason I dislike the National Trust is there's usually very poor 5G signal there, and they very rarely serve chips in National Trust cafes. That's why I don't like it, to be honest with you. But usually, when we hit the bedrooms part of the house, that's the point where my grumpiness kind of evolves from just grump about the cafe and the 5G towards a kind of righteous indignation stage of grumpiness. There's something about the sight of a four-poster bed in a bedroom with wallpaper that is hideous floral wallpaper with golden flecks in it, but it just brings out the Puritan in me. I studied British social history at A level and as an undergraduate, and to be honest with you, most moments of my life are not spent pondering the 1834 Poor Law Amendment Act. But for some reason, if you put me behind a red cord looking at a chamber pot, I'm suddenly back in those classrooms thinking about 19th century social reforms. And I find myself getting really angry about the amount of wealth that's been squandered on horrible wallpaper when there was a time, about the same time this wallpaper went up, when people were unable to feed themselves. And those people unable to feed themselves were sent to workhouses that were deliberately designed to be as miserable as possible. I don't really have any interest in 19th century home decor or bric-a-brac, which is why maybe I see the problems with the setup much more clearly than people who maybe can see the beauty and the culture in these places. And I think, going back to our reading, if we look at that first verse, we might find Paul giving off a similar vibe to the vibe that I give off when we visit a National Trust property. The first verse said this: While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply distressed to see that the city was full of idols. Just before this passage, Paul was in a place called Berea, and he was bringing lots of people to faith in Jesus in Berea. But there were some Jews that he had a history with who rocked up to put the kibosh on everything. So those new Christians from Berea had taken Paul and kind of rushed him on to Athens to get him away from those Jews that had come to cause him problems. So Athens wasn't Paul's intended destination. He was making his way towards Rome, but he finds himself in Athens waiting for his friends Silas and Timothy to catch him up because they've been able to stay in Berea for a bit. So he's kind of unexpectedly finds himself in Athens. And I wonder if Paul didn't really want to be in Athens. And I wonder if he was stuck there waiting for his friends. If he might have found himself looking around at the place and starting to spot everything that's wrong with it. It doesn't take him very long to spot the fact that there's an awful lot of idolatry going on, like hideous floral wallpaper in a National Trust property. It's everywhere. And as Paul is just there, waiting for his friends to show up, he doesn't have much else to do than to look at these idols and get really wound up by them. Sometimes it takes a grumpy outsider to be able to see the problems with a place for what they are. So as we come to look at this passage with the lens of kind of our mission strategy and what we do in mission as a benefice, I think it starts with a challenge to start looking at our culture and the culture around us through the lens of a grumpy outsider. So firstly, we need to learn to look at the culture of the people around us as that outsider, because that is how Christians in a secular world are meant to see the world. In 2 Peter 11, we are told that as Christians, we are foreigners and strangers on this earth. As Christians in a world that doesn't recognize Jesus, we need to be able to look at our culture in the same way that Paul looked at the Greek culture and could immediately see what was wrong with it. He saw the idols all around Athens and he knew what the problem with Athens was. Do we have that same ability to look at the issues that are going on around us and know what the problem is? We'll come back to this a bit later. But before we move on, just note that that first step in our strategy is about noticing the problems in the society that we're seeking to reach. So once Paul has identified that the issue for the Greeks is idolatry, his next step is to start putting himself in a place where he can meet with people and start challenging them about this. Verse 7 of our passage says this: "So he argued in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons, and also in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there." And it's those few words at the end that really strike me: with those who happened to be there. Paul put himself in the central places in the life of the people of Athens. He went to the temple where he knew he would encounter Jews who lived in Athens. And then he went to the marketplace where he knew he would bump into the ordinary people as they went around about their day-to-day lives. And that's really important because Paul doesn't want to do what it might have been tempting to do. When I get fed up in the National Trust, what I really want to do is sit in the cafe near the way in, plonk myself down at a table and mutter to myself about Chartism until Esther is finished and we can go home. The equivalent of that for Paul would have been to find some wall on the outskirts of Athens and just sit on it, muttering about how idolatrous everyone is. But that's not what Paul does. He doesn't choose to sit on the outside and throw stones at those on the inside. He chooses to go to the very heart of the city where the people are, to engage with the people where they are at. He doesn't expect the people of Athens to magically come around to his way of thinking and his way of doing things before he engages with them. He goes to meet them literally, geographically, where they are at. So that's the second point in the strategy, which again we'll come back to. Point 1 is to notice from the outside what issues that society is facing. Then point 2 is to go in and meet with the people in that society where they are at, which puts us on to point 3. Paul notices the problem and goes to where the people are at in order to discuss it with them. And through doing this, he finds himself noticed. Verse 19. So they took him and brought him to the Areopagus and asked him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? It sounds strange to us, so we'd like to know what it means." So those two steps have taken Paul to a place where the influential people in Athens have invited him into the heart of their debating circle and invited him to talk to them. It's interesting to see what he does with that platform that he is given. Verses 22 and 23. Then Paul stood in front of the Areopagus and said, "Athenians, I see how extremely religious you are in every way. For as I went through the city and looked carefully at the objects of your worship, I found among them an altar with the inscription, 'To an unknown God.' What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you." He starts by stating something that they have in common. We know that he's really distressed by the idolatry that he's seen in Athens. But given the platform to speak, he doesn't start by telling them all about idolatry. He doesn't start by calling them heathen idolaters. He starts by saying words to the effect of, "Couldn't notice how religious you are." That's not intended as a criticism, I don't think. He's acknowledging the fact that they are searching for the truth. He doesn't think they're doing it in the right way, but that's not his opening salvo. His opening salvo is to notice that within the Greek culture, there is something that he can relate to. And he engages with that and uses that as a springboard for talking about Jesus. So that's step 3. Step 1, he's noticed the problem. Step 2, he's met with the people where they are at. And step 3, when he's acknowledged what's good about them and their culture, which tees up that final step. Because having acknowledged what they've gotten right, he pivots to telling them what they've got wrong. The God who made the world and everything in it, he who is Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mortals life and breath and all things. Paul's not looking for a fight. He's not trying to deliberately upset people, but he's not afraid of challenging the Athenians' flaw in their logic. Because the thing is, Paul knew the flaw in their logic before the conversation started. The flaw in their logic is that God doesn't need shrines to live in, which is what jumped out at him all the way back at the beginning of our reading when he noticed all the idols lying around the place. But he doesn't jump just straight in and reveal it to them the moment he reaches Athens. He earns the right to unpack that flaw with them. He went through a process of meeting them where they were at and respecting them and their culture and their way of doing things before he challenges them about the things they are wrong about. The outcome of this is that he gets the chance to unpack the gospel, and there are mixed results to that. The very end of our passage said this: "When they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some scoffed, but others said, 'We will hear you again about this.' And at that point Paul left them, but some of them joined him and became believers." So that's the 4 steps Paul goes through and the 4 steps of our strategy as we develop an outreach strategy. Step 1, notice the culture we're looking to reach into. Step 2, place ourselves where people are at in that culture. Step 3, affirm people in what is good about that culture. And then step 4, challenge that culture on some of the stuff that is a bit less healthy. I'm going to walk you through how we plan to do this with children and families, particularly over the coming months, which I hope will show some people a way that they can get involved practically. Others might be inspired to pray for what we are doing here in a more informed manner. And maybe there are others still who look at this method and find themselves starting to think about the other demographics that we could be reaching and looking at the culture and wondering where other people are that we could be reaching, so that when we come to move on to think about other demographics, we've already done some of that groundwork thinking. So where are we up to with children and families work is that we've looked at the culture that they exist in, and we've noticed how hyper pressurized it is. There are all sorts of expectations and responsibilities that are placed on, well, everybody's dealing with it, aren't they, but parents in particular. The need to be here, there and everywhere. Often, and I know this as a parent myself, don't have time to sit down and eat lunch, let alone set aside an hour or two on a Sunday morning to sit in a church service to hear a sermon and then really reflect on what was being said. So that's what we've noticed doing step one. And then in step two, we need to think about how can we place ourselves where children and families are at. And for us, that means designing a ministry that takes place at a time and a place that works for families and children. And at the same time, it needs to be a ministry that offers them space and gives them a break from some of the pressures that are constantly there. And that's kind of the starting point for designing this building church ministry. Uh, so just to talk you through a little bit about what that is. Just four quick salient points about building church. We're launching the first one. We're going to try it in a couple of different places to see what works for families. But Leamington Hastings is the first one we're going to try because it's just up the road from a school, Leamington Hastings Academy, and the timing is going to be just after the school run. So we're hoping we've picked a time and a place that will work for families. And the sessions will start with tea, coffee, and snacks, a time for the children to play with some Lego or do some crafts. That offers a space for the parents to sit down knowing that their kids are engaged. And that's an opportunity for them to have a conversation with an adult for a change if they spend a lot of time at home with kids, but also an opportunity to have a hot drink that's hopefully still warm, which is a bit of a luxury sometimes for some parents and families. Then once we've had a bit of that sort of free time space, we'll have a time with some music and some Bible teaching that will hopefully be engaging for both adults and children, allowing those families that have come together some quality time together, as well as space to think about some of the deeper things that so often get pushed to the back of our minds just through the busyness of life. And then after some more activities, we end with a light tea, meaning parents don't have to worry about sorting out dinner when they get home. And all through this, we are looking to affirm the parents that come, affirm them that they are welcome in this space, affirm them that they are doing a good job. We know how stressful and pressurized it is, but we can see them and we can see them doing it. And that's why we want to encourage them that they are doing it well, but also to be there to help them and offer any help we can be. It's not a place to be burdening parents by telling them that they should be coming to church every week on a Sunday morning. And that takes us to stage 3 of the process, which is what we're essentially looking at over the next 6 to 12 months. There will be a time for step 4 when we need to challenge attendees a bit more, give them space to explore faith in a bit more depth, looking to bring people to a place where they're ready to make that commitment to a relationship with Jesus. But that stage is not what we're rushing straight onto. Building church is what I want to talk about primarily this morning. And building church is really about steps 2 and 3 of that model. It's about putting ourselves where families and children might actually be, and then putting ourselves in a place to engage with them, to affirm what is good in their lives, to offer them encouragement. Stage 4 will come. We've got ideas, but I've gone on for too long already for now. So just in conclusion, if building church is something that you'd like to help with, please let me know. We need people just to be there, to have friendly faces that can smile, that can chat to people over tea, coffee, snack, and Lego. We need people who are willing to serve refreshments and to help take that cooking load off parents afterwards. And we also need people who are able to lead crafts and be there. If that's something you feel you could do any of those things, do let me know. Do drop me an email. But if that is really not something that you feel able to do, please do be praying for building church, that people will come and that they will get what they need out of it. And as you pray, maybe you could be asking God to give you the eyes of a grumpy outsider as you look at the other demographics that the church here in our benefice just isn't reaching, isn't engaging with, isn't providing what they're looking for. So that we've got things working in our heads so that as this children and families ministry hopefully evolves and grows and becomes a bit more self-sufficient, we might have some resource to put into other demographics. So let's pray. Lord God, we thank you so much that we have a gospel to proclaim. Thank you that gospel is good news to all demographics, whatever pressures or problems or issues different demographics, different people are facing. You offer good news to them. Please equip and encourage us to bring that good news to people where they are at. We pray especially for Building Church. We pray that you may use it to bring people to you. Help us to find the times and the places that work for families who have busy lives. Help us to provide what they need, to offer that space and that tonic to all the pressure that they face elsewhere. May you bring people to church to find a break from the pressure. So we entrust our strategy and all our ideas to you. Guide us and shape us and help us to follow your call and to fulfill your plans for this benefice. Amen.